Alright, welcome back to another Impressions video. Today we're going to be taking a look at Dragon Quest Monsters: The Dark Prince. This is the newest entry in the Dragon Quest Monsters franchise. It is a spin-off of the Dragon Quest series, and it's been around for quite a while. Actually, one of my first encounters with the Dragon Quest series, I think, if I remember correctly, was Dragon Warrior Monsters on the Game Boy. This is before the name finally officially changed to Dragon Quest in the West, but that's neither here nor there. Let's jump into it and see what this game's all about. So first and foremost, the Dragon Quest Monsters series is a monster battling and raising game. It is similar to Pokemon or the Digimon, various Digimon games, the Persona games even as well. It's very similar or in that vein to those games, so you'll be running around catching or scouting, in this case, monsters, and you'll be adding them to your team. Where this game kind of deviates a little bit is with the synthesis system, kind of similar honestly to Persona and some of the Digimon spin-offs like Cyber Sleuth. You fuse monsters together, and this is how you can create new monsters or even unique ones that you're not going to be able to find out on the field. Another way that this kind of deviates from things like Pokemon is this game is actually kind of a slow burn unless you really engage with the synthesis mechanic. The big goal of it isn't just to see a new unique monster with some new abilities, but to power up that creature in general. Like, you'll create or you'll blend two monsters together and they have the stats and traits of the previous monster, and they even carry over their skill list that you've unlocked, because just like in the normal Dragon Quest games, you unlock abilities and stats through leveling up and by allocating talent points, or skill points as I believe they're called, and these carry over and blend into your next monster. So for example, if you have a monster where you've gotten like a few basic attacks and some really good stat upgrades, you're going to want to blend that into the next monster that complements those stats and abilities. And then your new monster will have those stats already unlocked, and you can proceed from there. It's a really unique system, and it kind of really emphasizes the kind of recycling of your monsters and kind of consistently building up to the next big monster, and kind of having the idea of a consistent build for your monster in your brain for things like defensive or offensive or using magic and whatnot. It's a pretty nice system, but it's not overly complicated either, but it is something you'll have to think about while you're doing it. Like I said, I'm not a really big Dragon Quest fan. I have played Dragon Quest 8 and I played a few of the spin-offs, and I'm currently trying to play through Dragon Quest 11, even though I haven't played it in like a year. Dragon Quest isn't a series I'm super familiar with, but it is one that I am aware of and I have dabbled in various times in my life. So Dragon Quest Monsters didn't really have a lot of appeal for me just off the bat, because it is definitely heavily favoring people who are familiar with the franchise, and especially the monsters themselves that are in every Dragon Quest game. So all the monsters that you're familiar with and that you love, or you might love if you're a fan of the franchise, like slimes, the death machines, the crazy dragon with like the giant, what is it, the jug that it carries around, so on and so forth. They're all here, as well as some unique ones, I believe. I'm not really sure, because like I said, I'm not super tuned into the Dragon Quest Monsters franchise. There are some unique ones as well, and you can see these or unlock them by the synthesis mechanic that I mentioned earlier. That said, I do like a lot of the monster designs in this game. I think they're very fun, they're very quirky, they're very cute. Nothing really hits the way a Pokemon does, but I do think some of the monster designs are quite nice, and I do like the general look of this game. I think it's really nice. And speaking of the look of this game, this is a Switch exclusive, or at least it is for the moment. I don't know if it'll get ported to anything else. I wouldn't be too surprised if we see it on PC or something like that down the line. I don't think Nintendo has exclusivity for it, but Anyway, this game looks pretty decent. It is a Switch game, like I said, so you gotta temper your expectations. And one of the things that really surprised me, or things that I really like about it, is the environments. I think the environments in this game are really nice. They have a lot of variety to them. I wasn't really expecting like to go from like a dungeon area or a machine area to an area filled with sweets. It was very cute and very interesting. That said, the areas in the game aren't super massive. They are kind of slightly biggish maps, and they are not interconnected, so you go into one and you have to load into the next one. It's an okay system, but I do feel like it makes the world lack a lot of cohesion or interconnectivity feeling. It feels like I'm just going to separate worlds. It doesn't feel like this is all part of one big world. That is also a little bit of the story as well. The story is pretty interesting here as well. I was expecting it to be a little lighter than it was, but the story here isn't overbearing or a constant thing like a mainline Dragon Quest game is. We play as the Dark Prince. He is the prince of, or the son of, the current emperor of the monsters, the current big bad of monsters, but his wife, or your mother, was a human, so we are this half monster, half human character. And a really interesting thing happens to him where his father puts a curse on him where he can't hurt monsters. He can create this sword, but he can't fight with it. So that is the big onus, or the big reason that he has to collect these monsters to do the battling for him. It's a pretty interesting premise, and as it goes along, you actually find a few other characters. You find an elf girl and a human that become your companions. You obviously befriend lots of monsters. Every area you go to, you basically befriend a bunch of different monsters, and you help out their town. But the story itself has some pretty emotional moments in it, and that was probably the biggest surprise, but it's definitely a lighter adventure than the usual Dragon Quest fare, but it also has its moments too, so it's a pretty good time. And while I'm not quite at the end of this game, I did want to give my impressions of it, because it is, I think a lot of people might skip it if they don't hear impressions of it right away. I think it's doing a pretty decent amount with what it's got as a premise, and also this game is pretty beefy. I think it feels like this game is going to wrap up around 40 to 50 hours, and from what I've heard from this franchise, the Monsters spin-off series, they have quite a lot of post-game stuff that you can do. And even Square Enix themselves said, hey, no spoilers for the post-game. Please leave that stuff off of your reviews and your streams and whatnot. So, or please respect people's not wanting to see that stuff. So we'll see what the plot twists and whatnot are as I get to them. Running around in the world is pretty simple, and it's nothing too complicated. You don't have very many options other than running around, and you can jump as well as you explore the environments and pick up treasures and battle monsters to scout or just to grind on some XP. It does have a few unique traits to it though. There are a few points where you can traverse the environment in unique ways to get to specific areas, like you can grab onto leaves or get caught up in like gusts of wind and so on and so forth. It's pretty unique stuff, or, well, not unique, but it's pretty interesting. Where it does get the most interesting though is the season mechanic in some areas. When you're outside of a dungeon but you're still in an area with monsters, you can actually experience seasons. And the seasons are on a timer, so after a few minutes it'll change into the next season. And it also changes the environment and the kind of monsters that you can find. This is a really, really interesting way to do things, because it's not unseen, obviously, but it's really nice to see it return after so many Pokemon games not using this kind of stuff. So the monsters can change, but also the environment changes. Excuse me. And it also changes the way you can traverse the environment. In summer, for example, it might have some vines that you can climb, and in winter, it might have a slope that you can slide down, or a lake will freeze over so you can cross it. It doesn't hinder the progress of the story moments, but it does give you access to a lot of the side areas. There are also some super bosses running around in these areas too. When you first encounter them, they're going to one-shot you easily, but thankfully this game has quite generous quick travel, so you can go back and forth between areas and pick things up. And you can even go back and fight these big bosses whenever you want. Battles, however, are the usual Dragon Quest fare. They're not anything too different than you might expect from Dragon Quest. You still choose your attacks, and you still engage the enemies, and you watch all of your attacks go out after you make all of your decisions. And you can also auto-battle or even speed up the battles, which is really nice to see because a lot of games don't include those, but I think they're always welcome in turn-based battles. Like I said, this is pretty standard Dragon Quest battle stuff, so if you're not a fan of the Dragon Quest battle system, then you're probably not gonna like this game too much. It's pretty standard stuff, but it's serviceable, it still works, it's still classic, and it's still fine. There's also a little bit of a progression blocking system where you have to go back to an arena and do some challenge battles to kind of upgrade your status in the game world, and it also affects the ease of scouting monsters, and it can even affect the kind of monsters that you'll see in some later areas. It's pretty interesting. It has kind of a gym battle-esque vibe to it, but it's not actually too difficult until you get to the later ranks, and then it starts getting a little more difficult. But for the most part, this game is a pretty easy-ish chill vibe. I never had too much trouble with it, or I haven't had any trouble so far, but of course that can change in the end game or the post-game areas. But to wrap things up, I just wanted to say I also really like the voice acting in the Dragon Quest series, especially this game. I think the writing team really goes hard on Dragon Quest. The performances are good, they're fun, they're a little cheesy and hammed up, obviously, but some of the writing for the character introductions or the battles and whatnot are pretty fun, and whoever wrote them really had fun with it, obviously.
But will his next opponent succeed in sabotaging his ascent? He's a swordmaster who forecasts disaster so fast you'll be aghast to the very last. It's the Great Invisible!
But yes, that is my impression of Dragon Quest Monsters: The Dark Prince. This is just my initial impressions. I've played this game for a decent amount. I'm more than halfway through it, but I wanted to just give my impressions and talk about it a bit, because I don't think I want to do a full review on this, because I don't know if I'll play it all in one go. I'm super far behind in every game at the moment, and adding another RPG to the mix was a mistake. But yeah, I think this game will hit for Dragon Quest fans, and especially Dragon Quest Monsters fans. I know it blew up here in Japan, sold like almost 400,000 copies in the first weekend here in Japan, or the first week or so. So that's pretty crazy, but like I said, I'm not a huge Dragon Quest fan, but I still wanted to try this one out just cuz, and I ended up liking it quite a lot. Just like at the end of the day, just like chilling in bed and like playing through a good chunk of it in every session. So I'm digging it, but this is definitely one that's for the fans. It's not going to be, it might not be the big Dragon Quest adventure that would make a new fan out of anyone, but for those who are already indoctrinated into the Dragon Quest world, this is an easy purchase for you. I think you'll really enjoy it, especially if you've somehow avoided the flood of RPGs that are out at the moment. But that's going to be it for this one. Please like, sub, leave a comment down below, hit the bell for notifications if you have notifications turned on. I've been Valkerion, and that was my impressions of Dragon Quest Monsters: The Dark Prince. I almost forgot the secondary title. It's a pretty decent game, but I hope to see you again next time, and I'm gonna sit back, relax, nurse this cold I have, if you haven't noticed my voice sounds weird. And I'm going to play a little bit more Dragon Quest Monsters and try not to sneeze all over my Switch. See you next time.
You're one of us now.